Hello everyone, my name is Sean Walker. I'm a Principal Product Success Architect and part of the Ranger team here at ServiceNow. Today I'm going to be taking you through some of the essential tactics for hardware asset management and installing it within your instance. As always, we've got our safe harbor notice for any forward-looking statements. So today I'm going to take you through some of the prerequisites you're going to want to think about before installing hardware asset management. Then I'll take you through the steps of installing hardware asset management and configuring hardware asset management. So the major prerequisites you're going to want to think about before installing hardware asset management is the foundational data. So foundational data, they're tables that exist in your instance, and they're common tables that are shared with a bunch of other applications within your instance. So you're going to want to go through each of these and really understand the kind of data that's in there. So the first thing you're going to want to look at is your employee or your user data. So this data is typically imported from, say, Active Directory or from external sources like an HR system. So it's really critical that the user data in your instance be accurate because you're going to be using it throughout a lot of the ITAM processes, like populating the assigned to user on the assets, or maybe allocating user-based software entitlements. The next thing you're going to want to look at is locations. So locations are often set up when the platform is first configured, and you really want to hope they're being maintained regularly by the platform team. You're going to want to go through and look at those location data to see if it's going to meet your needs going forward. A lot of your reports are going to be based off of location a lot of times. And you're also going to want to maybe take a look and see if location hierarchies have been created within the instance. They can really improve a lot of the HAM processes within the tool. You can definitely find out more information about location hierarchies and how you can use them in things like service locations and distribution channels. We have our video playlist, Ask a Ranger, Hardware Asset Management, which has a lot of the content there, as well as the ServiceNow docs page. So you're going to want to look through that and really understand those locations. The next thing would be the cost centers and departments. Again, these are usually set up when the platform is set up, and they're going to be pulled in from other sources. You're going to use these a lot of times for reporting or maybe charge back to the various departments and cost centers. So you're going to want to see what's there and see whether it will meet your needs for ITAM. The next thing that's really critical for a lot of the HAM processes are the stock rooms. So you're going to want to see if any stock rooms are already created in your instance and whether they're still accurate. And if they're not, you're going to want to get those updated. And if you don't have any, you're going to want to think about creating those. Now, you don't have to create them before you install HAM, but you're definitely going to want to create them right after you install HAM, so you can start assigning a bunch of your assets to your stock rooms. Again, a lot of the flows within ServiceNow are going to refer to stock rooms. And of course, we do have videos on this on our Ask a Ranger Hardware Asset Management series, and there's tons of documentation on this. And last but not least, you're going to want to take a look at the companies table. Now, the companies table within the platform is also the same table that's used for manufacturers and vendors. The manufacturers and vendors are just attributes on the company record. So that can specify that a company is a manufacturer, a company is a vendor. So you're going to want to make sure that all the vendors you purchase through and a lot of the manufacturers that you use are already in the system, and there's not any duplicates. You're going to want to make sure it's clean data. So again, for all these tables, go through them, make sure they have what you need, and if not, talk to the various departments to get that data in there. Okay, now we're going to get started with installing HAM. So we're going to go through the first section, which is installing hardware asset management. And then we're going to go through the next section, which is configuring hardware asset management. And I'll take you through each one of these steps in the checklist. So the first step in installing hardware asset management is requesting the HAM plugin or HAM application from the ServiceNow store. So you're going to need to be an administrator within ServiceNow to be able to do this step. So you're going to have to work with your platform administrator, your system administrator to do the following steps, because you likely don't have permission yourself, or maybe you do if you're an admin within the platform. So the first thing is you're going to go to the application manager within ServiceNow, and you can actually click on the open store button up in the top right corner, which is going to bring you to the ServiceNow store. And you're going to want to log into the store with your credentials. So again, this is where your admin's likely going to need to do this because they're going to have credentials that allow them to install applications from the store. So once you're in the store, you're going to search for hardware asset management, and you're going to find it, and you're going to go into it, and you have a very simple button that says request install. You can definitely specify other versions if you needed to, but it's always recommended to install the latest version. So remember, hardware asset management is a store-based application, so it does update a little bit more frequently than our version releases. So you can update your HAM, and you're going to want to check on your hardware asset management application from time to time, just like your other store apps, to see if there's any valid updates. When you're requesting it, you're going to need to validate your instance name and your reason for it, and simply click on the request button, and that will submit the request to have the application added to your instance. It's going to go through an approval process to make sure you have permission or you have a valid subscription for HAM. And once that's done, you're going to receive an email that says that it's been approved and it's been requested for you. And you're going to wait a little while for the the application manager to synchronize with the store, and then once that's done, it'll become available for you. So this is the first icon like this I have within this video. We do have created a specific video on requesting the hardware asset management plugin. So what you can do now is pause this video, and you can just scan this QR code, and it will take you to our other video on the hardware asset management plugin installation. Okay, so now that we've requested HAM from the store, we can go ahead and install that application. So to do that, you're going to want to go back to the application manager, and you're going to want to search for hardware asset management. And you should see that as long as your application manager has been synchronized with the store, you're going to be able to see the hardware asset management application, and you're going to click on the install button. Again, we do have a very specific video on this step, which is installing the hardware asset management application. So you can scan the QR code to go to that video. So once you've clicked on the install button, you're going to see it coming up, and it's going to show you a bunch of the dependencies that are going to be installed when you install the hardware asset management application. So all these different 6 applications are going to be installed, and you can schedule it for later if you do choose, or you can click on the install now and then install. And so what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and it's going to start installing all of the different pieces of HAM. This will take a while. Took a couple hours in my instance when I did it. Depends on your instance, depends on where it is, etc., and what's going on. But it will take a little while to install the HAM application. But when it's done, you will see the successfully installed button or screen pop up. All right, from there, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to validate that HAM has been installed. And the easiest way to do this is to actually go directly to the hardware asset management workspace, which gets installed with HAM. So to do that, you can use the workspace menu up in the top and just look for hardware asset workspace, or you can go to the filter navigator and type in hardware asset, and you should see the hardware asset workspace. And so what will happen is when you click on that, it's going to bring up the workspace, and essentially if the workspace comes up, you know HAM has been installed. By all means, take a look around, explore all the different workspaces that are available. If you want more information on that, we do have a specific video called the Overview of Hardware and Workspace, which gives you a bit more in-depth information on Workspace and a lot of the other hardware asset management features. Okay, so now we've requested it from the store, we've installed the application. One of the other things we want to make sure we do is install the very handy Content Library Portal. And what the Content Library Portal does is it adds another section to the Hardware Asset Workspace, which is going to allow you to search our content library tables and all of the different models and manufacturers that are available in our content library. So perhaps you need to look up all the different models for a Lenovo T14 or something like that, and you can see all the different model numbers associated with that product, etc. Or potentially you want to look at some lifecycle information for that specific model, and that's what you're going to use the Content Library Portal for. So again, you're going to navigate to the ServiceNow store. This is a store application as well, and you're going to look for Content Library Portal. And once you find that, it's exactly the same thing as you did for HAM, you're going to click on the Get button, and that plugin will then become available for you in your application manager. Again, we do have a video on this if you want to see how to install the Content Library Portal. So once the Content Library Portal has been installed, you can go ahead and the same thing, validate that it's been installed. You can go back to the Hardware Asset Workspace, again through the Workspaces menu or the Filter Navigator. And what you'll see is there's a new icon that appears kind of midway through here the screen. You'll see the Content Lookup button, and that'll bring you to the Content Lookup workspace where you can type in things like model numbers, manufacturers, whatever you want to be able to search our content library. Okay, so now that we're done installing the content library, there's one more thing you need to check, and you want to make sure that the Asset Receiving Mobile plugin is installed. So from there, you're going to want to go in again to the Application Manager, and you're going to want to take a look for Asset Receiving Mobile. Most times this plugin is going to already be installed in your instance, but you are going to want to make sure it is, because it will allow you to use features like the mobile agent app, which allows you to do things like audits and asset lookups, so that's via mobile. So it's a very, very handy application to have in, and does provide a lot of benefits. So to do that, if it's not installed, you just click on the install button. Again, it's going to install some dependencies. It's going to be a little different depending on each instance, what's already installed, what's not. And again, same concept. It's going to go through the installation process, and when it's done, it will tell you it's been successfully installed. Okay, so that's it. We've finished installing Hardware Asset Management application. This video obviously is pretty short, but it will take you a little while to get all of these pieces installed and running in your instance. So do kind of keep in mind that it does take a while to install these apps. Next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to go through the configuring of Hardware Asset Management and things you need to think about when you go ahead and start configuring the application. So the first thing I'm going to suggest that you take a look at is the Normalization Data Services. Now, this isn't part of HAM. This is actually part of the platform, and it's a separate application in the platform. And what its purpose is to normalize the company name across the platform. So again, this is something you're going to want to have a discussion with your platform administrators about this and about whether or not this is done in your instance or not. Because again, it is platform wide and it does normalize the data in that foundational table, like the company table. So you want to make sure that you're doing this again in your development instance, and you're working with the right people to do all the testing when you do run through the normalization data services. So what you can do is you can look under the filter navigator for normalization, and you should see guided setup. And once you go into the guided setup, it'll tell you what has been done in your instance. In this particular case, the guided setup hasn't been run in this instance, so it's at 0%. Now your instance could vary because this is a platform plugin, so this might already be done, but I still do recommend you look at this, make sure it's been done, because it does help overall with HAM. Having that company normalized, which also means your manufacturers and your vendors get normalized because it's the same table. So again, if you want more information on normalization data services, I've included here a QR code for the actual link to the documentation on our ServiceNow docs site. So you're going to want to review that and familiarize yourself with normalization data services. So the normalization data services essentially runs you through 7 different steps. From activating the plugins to normalizing or to downloading the content data, and then going ahead and normalizing what's already in your instance today. So some of these things may vary. For example, you might not see normalized software asset management if you don't have software asset management. If you only have HAM, or you won't see that particular option. So again, that's where the percentage of completion of the guided setup, it's going to vary, right? So maybe they ran the initial setup of normalization data services when they first installed the instance, and some stuff has been done subsequently, so it's not normalized across the whole platform. You're going to want to make sure it's 100%, or at least there's reasons why it's not 100%, and working with that platform team to understand that. So again, once it's done, you should see it at 100%. And we do have a video on this on our Ask a Ranger playlist for normalization data services plugin and its guided setup. So I'll take you through each one of these steps. All right, so now that normalization data services is done, we're going to start talking about guided setup for HAM. So to access the guided setup for HAM, it's actually not in the hardware asset management workspace. It's within the actual manuals and modules. So you're going to want us to go to the filter navigator and type HAM. Now again, you're going to need to be an admin to run a lot of the features within the guided setup. So you're going to have to work with the administrator on this guided setup, and you're going to want to go through it and really understand what's there. So when we click on guided setup, it's going to bring us to, again, very much like the normalization data services guided setup, it's going to take you through this guided setup experience to really go through and get hardware asset management set up within your environment. So when you click on the guided setup and you click on the configure, it's going to bring you to this section. And what we're going to focus on today is the parts of the configuration, which is the resource category opt-in and content services and setup opt-in. We're not going to look at the other features of this because you're going to want to get a lot deeper than we're going to get in this video. And the intent of this video is just to get HAM installed and base configured in your environment, not to go through any of the more complex or things that you're going to want to spend more time on process-wise. So we're only going to cover those 2, and then we're going to get into the normalization, and we're going to talk about those as well. Because these 4 pieces are really that base piece that you need to get HAM set up within your environment. Again, we do have a video on this guided setup for HAM. So the first thing is the resource category opt-in. So what resource categories are is they allow you to specify the resource category that are part of your HAM subscription. So you may, when you've negotiated your purchase of ham, decide you're only going to manage certain classes of assets in your instance, and you're not going to manage others. So what you're going to want to do is specify and opt in to only those classes that you have subscriptions for and that you're going to be managing. So each one of the categories at the top here, you're going to want to go through and decide whether it's opted in or opted out. So you can see here in the example, we have end user compute and we are opted into that. We can see the little check mark that says opted in. So we can just go ahead and mark that end user compute as complete and then move on to the next, which is the mobile devices. And so, for example, when we negotiated our subscriptions for ham, we said we're not going to be managing mobiles. So I'm going to want to make sure I'm opting out of mobiles because, again, they'll consume subscription units and we don't want that. So we're going to click on the opt out button, and when you click on the opt out button, it's going to show you the little warning. Are you sure you want to opt out? And you click OK. So later on, maybe you've decided you've changed your mind and you need to opt in or change some of these resource categories. You can find those resource categories afterwards through the filter navigator. You just type in resource category. It's not something you see typically in the hardware asset management workspace. So you're going to want to take a look at them. You have to type in hardware resource categories. And again, I've included a link here directly to the documentation on resource categories if you want to know more about it. Okay, so we've got resource categories. The next thing we're going to do is the content services setup. And it's pretty straightforward on this. When you click on the configure button, what this is going to do is going to bring up a screen and it's going to ask you whether you want to opt into the content services. Now this is going to be optional for each customer. We do highly recommend though that you do opt in to the content services. Now there's a big thing to understand is this does not impact your ability to have the content libraries in your instance. The content libraries will automatically be downloaded to your instance weekly. So you're going to get all those models and manufacturers and life cycle data, etc. All that data is going to come down regardless of whether you opt in here or not. What this is going to do is this is going to allow your instance to communicate anything that's not normalized in your environment back up to our content team. So what it does is it feeds unnormalized data back to our team so they can review it, and if it's valid discovery data and it's valid data that needs to be added to our content library, they go ahead and add it based off of your data. Now, don't worry, all the data is anonymized. So when the data is sent up, there is no company specific information about your company sent to our content team, just the discovered information. So to opt in, we're just going to click on the yes, I agree to opt in. And it's going to, by default, enable all these 5 categories. I do recommend leaving all of them enabled. If there are specific models that you don't want to have uploaded to the content team, you can actually specify that on the model itself. And that's being shown in another video. And again, I've included here a link to the documentation on the hardware asset management content services. Okay, so that takes us to the end of the first section, which is, installing or basically setting up ham. I'm not going to get in deep to the next 5 items here because, again, you want to work with a partner or you really want to take time understanding the process and the impact of these, and it's too much to cover in this video. I have included a link here, though, for a little bit more information, documentation and a video on asset lifecycle automation so you can learn more about it. And then for the other ones, I do highly recommend that you download the Hardware Asset Management Process Guide. And that process guide has a lot of really good information for you on how to, on different processes, I should say, that are default within the instance, and what you're going to want to think about as somebody who's new to hardware asset management, and all the different processes you're going to want to look at implementing within your organization so you can really maximize the value of your HAM application. Okay, so we've done the resource categories, we've downloaded the content services, and now we're going to skip over to the normalization section. And so there's only 2 steps in the normalization section, and this is really to download the content and normalize the hardware models. So when you click on the configure on the content download, now this is all going to depend on, if doing this is going to depend on, how long ago did I install the hardware asset management application. If I'm doing this all within 1-2 days, yeah, I might want to go ahead and download this content. But by default, when you install hardware asset management, it's going to set up these default jobs to download weekly. So this is set up, and this instance is set up to download on a Friday. So if a Friday's already passed since I've installed HAM, the odds are you've already got all of your content down, and you don't really need to trigger the download. But if you're doing this all quickly and want to trigger those jobs, you can do that in here. It's a little bit more tricky. So what I do if I ever want to manually trigger those content download jobs is I go into the filter navigator, I type in scheduled jobs, go to system definition, scheduled jobs, and I search for download hardware. And that'll give me all of those 6 jobs or 7 jobs there. And I can actually go through each and every one and click on the execute now, which is going to download all of my content. And again, you're going to need to be an administrator to do this. A HAM administrator cannot do this. But again, it is a job that's set up weekly, so you might not have to do this, and you could probably just mark this as complete if you're doing the guided setup at least a week after you've installed HAM. Okay, and then the next thing, now that we've got the content downloaded, is going to be setting up or running the normalization. Again, this is something you want to do if you're doing this all quickly in one day. You're not going to want to, or you're going to want to trigger this after your content has downloaded. So you're not going to want to do the content download and then instantly trigger this normalization job. You're going to want to wait for that content to be down in your instance, and then this would be normalizing your existing data against the content tables. Again, this is a daily job that gets set up. You can execute it if you want manually through the scheduled jobs, just like the download content. But again, it runs daily to normalize your hardware information against our content libraries. Okay, and that pretty much completes the guided setup for HAM, or at least what I'm going to show you today. And last but not least, we're going to talk about setting up the HAM roles. So there's only 2 roles added when you install hardware asset management, and that's the HAM admin and the HAM user. So I'm going to suggest that you really familiarize yourself with these different roles and what they can actually do. And again, I'm going to recommend that you download that hardware asset management process guide, because it's got a lot of really good information on the different roles and responsibilities that we typically see within hardware asset management as a practice, right? So it'll go through the different process roles, like process owner and asset manager, asset analyst, etc., and give you some typical or stereotypical responsibilities of that role, and think about your organization and who within your organization fills each one of these roles. And then based off of that, you can assign them the actual ServiceNow roles that's most appropriate for that specific process role. Also in the process guide, it does have a RACI matrix, so it really does show you who is responsible, accountable, I can't remember C, and informed. So it'll go through all these different responsibilities for each one of the processes that's outlined. So I do highly recommend going through the process guide and looking at these roles when you're thinking about your organization. Okay, and that's it. That's all I wanted to cover with you today. So we went through installing hardware asset management and all the different steps you're going to want to take. We went through the basically the minimum configuration you're going to want to do within hardware asset management, and you are up and running. So what I'm going to say is stay tuned for our next video, which is going to be from setup to success, part 2. Essentially, we're going to go through the HAM maturity that's loaded on the success portal, and we're going to walk through the different crawl phase maturity items, so you have a better understanding of how to move yourself through a mature HAM within your organization. So I hope you enjoyed my video today, and as I said, stay tuned for the next one.